if you're the coach in, let's say, a larger school that actually has a student body to draw from, and you go out and you find 8 guys that are tall and athletic and strong and are dedicated, and you teach them somehow half-assedly even how to row, you have a shot, And so for me, that's always like, I want these younger coaches to develop a vision, With that comes fundraising, with that comes operation. The money will follow the success. You create enthusiasm, the money will follow. You don't need to win medals. You just create the vision and create enthusiasm. So that's the cool thing about ACRA. Any given year, it can be mixed up.
Anyway, you ready to rock and roll?
Ready to rock and roll.
Cool. All right, so we'll get started. So for everyone listening, so we have Frank Biller here, who is the head coach for the University of Virginia men's rowing program. And I'm really excited to talk to Frank today. I've gotten to observe the program that they have for years, especially in racing them directly when I was a coach. And Frank's someone who's been around since. And Frank, I'm going to let you kind of give your introduction and talk a little bit about your rowing experience and how you got into what you're doing now. But I know you've been at that program for a long time, since 2009, and have a lot of experience coaching. And the main reason I wanted to have Frank on for everyone listening is I wanted to talk to someone who can give us an incredibly good in-depth view on club rowing as a viable option for high school rowers on the men's side in particular. And University of Virginia is one of those programs that is competitive and operates at a very high level and is a very good formalized club. And I'm very interested to hear from Frank and his thoughts on club rowing, how it can be a viable option for high school rowers out there. But Frank, without further ado, let's start there with 2 different things, right? I want you to kind of give us a little bit of background on yourself, on your coaching experience, and how you landed into, this position as the coach at UVA. But then also give us a general landscape on club rowing as a whole, ACRA rowing as a whole, and just give us an idea of, from your eyes, the big picture, and then we can kind of narrow it down and dial in a little bit. But let's start with that.
Yeah, happy to do. So as you said, my name is Frank, and I was born and raised in Switzerland. That's in Europe. It's not Sweden, Switzerland. Actually had some overlap with Zeno Muller, who is quite known over here, usually for his crazy videos. And we've been friends for a long time. So hi, Zeno, in case you're watching. So I started rowing when I was 15. It was basically educational labor camp for me because I did something bad and my mom made me do it. And basically, as the deal was that if I would do the learn to row class, which was always on a Wednesday afternoon, for several weeks, then she wouldn't tell Dad, but I did. And honest to God, I do not remember what I did. I have no idea. But it must have been something that clearly scared me enough to go to rowing. Because before that, I really grew up with other sports and I really hadn't found my niche yet. So I go to this rowing class and I think I'm telling this story because I think it's very typical for rowing across the board, whether it's kids in high school stumbling into it or whether it's young adults in college stumbling into it, is that I just went and I had kind of like no idea what I'm going into and I didn't have any expectations and I really wasn't there for my own choice. And I come home in the evening for dinner and my mom's asking me, so how was it? Are you going to go back next week? And I said, no. And she's like, well, why not? And I said, because I'm going back tomorrow. She said, yeah, but there's no class. It's not until next Wednesday. I said, no, Coach asked me to come back. I asked Coach if I can come back tomorrow. And she said, yes. It was like an elderly, and I say elderly, like retired from her day job woman that was teaching rowing to the kids in the learn to row class. And she just, I guess she thought I was pretty good. And I actually enjoyed it because one of the sports I did that I was actually really good at was golf. And back in those days, I had nowhere to go in my development. I mean, some conversations about going abroad, but I didn't want to spend 8 hours in a driving range. So rowing kind of combined my strength, power, size, combined my temperament of like, I need to do something with my energy. And it really brought out, like, what hooked me right away was the technical difficulty. because I was like, day one, I was in one of those surfboards with a rowing thing on top where you scull. That was day one. Day two was the single, racing single. And that was it for the rest of my rowing. Like I never spent another minute in a beginner boat. And basically right off the bat, did that. And I never flipped, which is not something to brag about because I think you should, flip at some point when you learn to row, kind of push a little bit, but I just didn't. I actually, the first and only time I flipped was actually on the school keel, but I'm not going to tell that story. So anyhow, I got into rowing like this, got completely hooked on it. And unbeknownst to me, I had right off the bat some of the best coaches in the sport, period. So I had this elderly woman, her name was Waltraud, and she had a lot of experience in just teaching kids how to row. After that came Hansi Muller, who was former, junior national team rower in Switzerland, engineer, super dude. Like he just kind of was like the young, just recent college grad that brings all his enthusiasm into hard work. Another one was Bruno Schneider, who was probably one of the best sculling coaches in Switzerland, a very, very successful, phenomenal technical coach. Then when I made the national team, junior national team, I had Harry Mann, who didn't last too long. I mean, he died relatively youngish, but he had a huge impact on rowing. He was Sino's coach. He was the one that tamed Sino Muller, which was pretty hard to do. He brought a certain way of rowing into Switzerland, the way that he explained it. Now, most of the things he was saying didn't make any sense to me, and we really didn't like. I didn't like the guy. I thought he was an ass. But that's when you're 17, 18, And then hindsight, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I actually mid-20s, and I started coaching the juniors at my club, a lot of that came back, and especially with my, living in the US and actually learning somewhat proper English, I really started to understand what he was saying back then. And now I'm like looking back, I'm like, oh, you idiot. You had this unbelievable coach, who's, basically coached the GB8 in 2000 that rowed beautifully and won the Olympics. And that master, you had this guy and didn't appreciate it. But a lot of things stuck. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think that happens to a lot of people rowing juniors or rowing high school. Like you don't even know what you have until later. Even happens in college. It happens with our guys. Like even they come back, a couple of years after they graduate. They're like, crap, like we never understood how good we had it, and that's totally normal. I get it. But for me, so these were some really, really influential people on my coaching and in me falling in love with the sport. Not that I ever envisioned I'm going to do this for a living, not for a second, but that's how it panned out, and I'm not complaining at this point. So. That's how I got started.
And what brought you over here to start like coaching and eventually land on UVA? I know you had, you did some time at Drexel and things like that, but what brought you over here, and then eventually landing on UVA back in 2009?
Yeah, the short version of it is that I spent some time on Wall Street in the late 90s. Actually 96, 97-ish, always intermixing with my military service. So I would go like active duty Wall Street. And then I decided I want to do an MBA, which was completely unknown at the time in Switzerland, because I was exposed to it when I was working in New York. And I decided I want to do. And at the same time, as I went back home, this was the beginning of the dot-com boom, right? So we got 96, 97. Like you could make more money over lunch trading in your own pocket than you would make as your base salary at the end of the month. It was just crazy. But I really wanted to do finance and technology, like right at that intersection. And the school that I ended up with was Drexel. And it was phenomenal. Drexel's MBA program was great. It was awesome because we had a lot of exposure to engineering, computer engineering, .com stuff, and also then the whole like old school financial backbone, etc. So that was a great experience. I did actually 2 master degrees there, parallel running. And of course, I picked Philadelphia. I picked the city over the school. Of course, Wharton didn't want me because, I don't have a big name. I decided that the GMAT is not something you need to study for. So Wharton was out of the picture, which was probably for the better because I would probably get stayed stuck in finance. And so when I came to Philly, I wanted to row, and ahead of time, I emailed with Clete Graham in the Schuylkill Navy, and I want to row, and he was like, "Well, are you trying to get to the Olympics, or are you trying to have fun?" Because it was like you have Tennessee Vesper at the time, and then you have Fairmount, and I was like, "No, I want fun side." So I ended up in Fairmount, and the reason that matters is because at Fairmount, as you probably know, it's still kind of the same way. There's a lot of older guys. I have a bunch of young guys too, but there was a lot of older guys. And so I walked in there, and yet again, there was Diedrich Rose, who a lot of people may not be familiar with the name anymore, but he was the guy that brought the secret of German rowing from the 70s into Philadelphia. And still to this day, just a rowing genius. And there's all these conversations that are happening over breakfast where you learn so much, and all these other guys, Al Walklin, Kirk Hoffman, I mean, you name it. Just like you walk in there, you're abroad, you don't know anyone, and right off the bat, you have a family. And that is really that's something I didn't know before around the sport, this whole masters rowing scene. Even though I was only 30 or 29 when I came over, it still felt like masters rowing was for old people, but it was just so much fun. You go out there, bang heads, and you'll learn a lot more about the sport because honestly, I've sat in an 8 maybe a dozen times. And then I would row an 8 more in 1 month than I did in my entire rowing career. So that was kind of cool. And yeah, the whole community really sold it to me. I had no idea about high school rowing, right? So I ended up, one of my, club mates, Mike McKenna, was at Fairmont at the time. And he was coaching Mount St. Joe's, the girls, which is powerhouse in high school rowing. And he was like, "Oh, I want you to come up and help me, coach the girls, and my experience with women in rowing up to that day was actually very negative because the only women we had in the club that were super high maintenance. They were fast, but they were high maintenance, so they were very mean to us juniors, so we didn't like it. Again, formative years when you're 18, 19, 20, interesting how that works. So I was very skeptical about that. But I did go up because I like Mike. So I go up there. I joined the Mount St. Joe's for a couple practices. And I was like, wow, these guys are great. They have so much fun, so much power, so much, energy. And I felt so welcome there as well. So, of course, I was given the crappy bottom boats to start with. And it was just awesome. Coaching them was so much fun. It was really, it was a great time. And that really kind of re-engaged me with coaching. And I just had fun doing that. And then I finished all my degrees. I was actually set to go on a real estate investment trust in London to build up the operations for this entire big ass company. And the first sort of mini real estate crisis hit. That whole project got blown to bits. And through a couple interesting connections, I ended up at Nielsen Kelman, the maker of the Cox Box and producer of the Speed Coach. Yeah. And I was the sales manager there, and I basically walked into a family-owned business that needed a little bit of help on that side. And again, great people there. It was awesome a lot to learn from me because they do produce everything in-house. So you have on one side of the building is production, and then you have, sales, product development, and I was involved in everything. And the reason this matters is because the way I approached that job and the opportunities that were given to me by Alex Coker, by Michael Naughton, is to go out in the world and sell that Speed Coach concept. Because it's shocking to hear how backwards our sport is on the technical side and on the scientific side. And I didn't even know that because I always thought that all these coaches are like wizards, And so I had the chance. I was working with the Kiwis, I was working with the Australians, I was working with the Germans, I was working with the French, Swiss, you name it, I was there. Canadians, the US. And eventually, after about 4 years or so, it was time to make a change. I just came back from coaching in Beijing or helping out in Beijing, and it was time to move on. And I decided that I really wanted to go into sports management. So I had a verbal offer for basically being the director of the Swiss Federation. I made the last two to be the high performance manager in Germany. And I was just a little young, at the time I was still like 34 or something like that, 35. So I was a little bit on the young side for that. But one of the things I took away from those almost success and sort of tight failures was that, to complete your very impressive resume, you got to have some coaching experience, like create a track record for yourself. So I took this to heart, and I started deciding I want to switch into full-time coaching. And the person at the time asked me, another rowing professional asked me, like, what makes you think that you can do that? And I said, I can do that not because I'm good, but because so many people suck at it. And I knew that because of my deep insights into writing coaching launches and just a lack of understanding of how even is. If someone doesn't understand that current matters on the water, one way or the other, and all the sort of the details on that, which is something I explained a lot to a lot of people, you realize, Jesus, they don't even know they don't really quite understand the sport, do they? They're just going to hit the repeat button, And so that's how, and at the same time, I also coached at Vesper. So I had good exposure there. It wasn't like I was a complete rookie at coaching. I had a pretty good track record, not as much with the program of boats, but with individual athletes. That was like my forte. And that's what I actually really enjoyed, is just helping someone from here to get here. Then the rest of the journey is yours. And just being part of that journey and enjoying that and watching how they do afterwards. And so that's really what kicked me into coaching, to be honest. And I applied to a lot of jobs. I had no chance. Collegiate coaching, no chance. Like you haven't been part of the club. You haven't, the club of like varsity coaches. They don't even look at you, right? And so at the end, I had an opportunity within U.S. rowing, and I had an opportunity at Virginia. And my wife was like, well, I'm not moving to Oklahoma. And I was like, all right, well, how about Virginia? She's like, oh, let's go. So I actually met with people in Philadelphia, Andy Fletcher, president at the time, and made a handshake deal, packed up our household, and we moved to Virginia, like literally like that. When I got to Virginia, Kevin Sauer, women's coach at the time, just retired, he was there, and he was like, well, he thought I was there for an interview. I'm like, no, I'm it. That's it. I'm here. He was like, well, but you have never even visited. I'm like, I don't need to. I know a good thing when I see it. And so I ended up in Virginia. That's the short version, mind you. So there's a lot in between that, we could do a whole podcast about. But so I ended up in Virginia, and for me, it's very intriguing because so I got this business background, right? I got the military background, so I can organize stuff. I can get things done. I know numbers, which is a big advantage over a lot of coaches that, graduate college and go straight into coaching like you did. So I have all this like life experience I'm bringing to the job. So for me, that transition, that coming in there into something that was functional but not very good, that was great because we have a boathouse, we have boats, we have there's even some money around. It just didn't have a lot of people on the varsity, but we had some really good ones, like Matt Miller, still has the 2K record for the U.S., right? And I had a ton of support from a board of directors that was consisted of just phenomenal people. That's our strengths. So they were like, well, we're either going to go down the tubes or we're going to go take off, and you just tell us what you need and we'll make it happen. And they took a lot of risks on me. Like we're running $40,000-$50,000 deficits, like that kind of stuff. And they trusted me and turned it around financially, turned around speed-wise, etc. I could put all my skills and experiences to work, and I'm still here. Just the biggest thing is not like the speed on the water is like, like some years you have bigger athletes, some years that they have other qualities, maybe not necessarily moving a boat fast, but the business side on the club, for a club, the business side is a big deal because you have a lot of independence, but you also have a lot of responsibility. So if I mess this up, like I'm not just going to lose my job, like that program's going to go bad, right? So pressure. At least I felt that pressure. Now, being in my 16th year, I'm pretty chill about it. Like, I know I can always turn it around somehow.
All right, what's up, everyone? Kevin Leslie, and quick interruption to the podcast to tell you about the At the 1,000 Collective. The ATT Collective is an online community for high school rowers who want to better position themselves for long-term success at the college level. And in the collective, you're going to be invited to 2 group coaching Zooms per month featuring top coaches, elite athletes, rowing experts, where we're going to dive into topics centered around training, rowing performance, college recruiting, personal development, you name it. You're also going to get an opportunity for a live Q&A where you can ask individual questions to help set you on your own path. You're also going to receive a weekly newsletter with erg workouts, core circuits, tips and tricks for rowing and recruiting, and also highlights from any previous Zooms so you can begin to incorporate those into your own practice. Lastly, you're going to get unlimited access to all ATT online courses and programs, most notably the erg First, Row Second online course, where you can begin to do some training at your own pace. So the purpose of this program is to help athletes get the information and guidance to help them take that next step and feel prepared heading into college rowing. So if you're interested in joining, we're offering 50% off your first month. Go to the description below, grab the code, and we hope to see you in the next Zoom. And you'll also receive your first newsletter as soon as this upcoming week. So again, join the community. Let's have some fun. Let's keep pushing and evolving our rowing. And I hope to see you soon. Now back to the show. Peace. I actually had Coach Sauer on, I guess, back in March or May or whatever it was, when they're in the middle of the season. And he was talking a little bit about just the inception of, just the University of Virginia program, the construction of the boathouse, and obviously with the men's program and the women's program and how that's kind of been, working in tandem, the relationship there. So that was one of my favorite episodes, with just learning from him. So I'm sure, sharing that experience, at least having, exposure to him, and likewise, the other direction, I'm sure is just a great coaching combo, because that was an amazing conversation with him. But with that, so one of the things I wanted to kind of ask you about was, like you talked about the business aspect of a club program, and I always describe so University of Virginia men's rowing, right? The club side of it. I always look at the club rowing scene, and it's like there's the programs like UVA that are, right, you go on the website and they have the board of directors and the coaching and the student run. It's very fascinating kind of to see the differences in different tiers of club rowing programs out there. If you can, because I'm curious, if I put myself in the shoes of high school athletes, when you look at men's rowing as a whole, you have the Division I IRA varsity programs. You have the D3 NESCAC D3 programs, right, with their championships now. But the thing I really like about the ACRA programs and the club row programs, and UVA in particular, but you have these very brand name schools, very popular schools that support rowing, but it's not technically varsity status rowing. And you talk about the business side of that and the actual infrastructure to actually keep that as a well-oiled machine for long, for the entirety of its long durations. Talk to me a little bit about how that your guys' infrastructure is set, and then also maybe just club rowing as a whole, so that people have an understanding of, hey, this is a true organization business that is competing for, to win Heather Charles, ACRAs, whatever it may be. Describe that for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think it is indeed fascinating, and I will start with ACRA, the American Collegiate Rowing Association Championship, our national championship, most important race of the year. That's what we train for. That's all we care about in the end. In terms of competing, that's the goal that we work towards. Everything else is preparation and part of the process. That regatta, first off, has grown unbelievably. This is now the largest college regatta in the world, right? It's left Deadville in the dust. last year, the year before. In terms of competition, it's fascinating because we have all the boat classes, like all the Olympic boat classes, plus a few lightweight boat classes. And so just with the idea behind it that every athlete and every team should be able to race, that there is something for them to race in. And so sure, sometimes the last guy goes in the single or the last two guys go in the double or something. Obviously not, we're obviously not prioritizing the double over the 8. I wish we had this for the format where it's like the Olympics, but we don't. But you can call it filler boats, but I wouldn't because it's super competitive, right? So the winning time in the double, nothing to write home about. Like they're not going like 6:15, right? But it's competitive, and it's competitive on, the second half of the A final and the top of the B final and so on. And I have consistently seen athletes on our team, other teams, they row in the quad, right? Which is not a priority boat. They row in the quad. Their experience in the quad is so fundamentally game-changing for them that they start to apply themselves even more. And then all of a sudden they appear in the 2B in their senior year, So a lot of those things are happening. Lots of opportunity to race. Every race is competitive. The other part is what I tell, especially the ACRA coaches that are younger coaches or, sort of the lower programs that are not as big. I'm like, here's what you need to know. Each and every year, every program here has a chance of winning the Novice 8. The Novice 8, or they call it the Frosh 8 sometimes, that is one of the very important boat classes. And I'm saying this to them because everything else is making excuses. Because none of us, not Michigan, not Purdue, not Notre Dame, not UCLA, none of us has the whole package. None of us has all the money, plus recruiting slots, plus this, plus that. There's always something that's missing, right? And so, yeah, sure, UCLA, for example, they get more experienced guys in. Purdue had a lot of experienced guys this past fall. Michigan got more than before. We have less now, but we used to have more. Everything shifts around, but every school is academically no joke. And so you can't just get some 2.5 GPA, guy in there. It usually doesn't work. So they got to get in academically. None of us has tutoring support. None of us has an level of institutional support that puts you in a huge advantage. It's all levels out. And if you're the coach in, let's say, a larger school that actually has a student body to draw from, and you go out and you find 8 guys that are tall and athletic and strong and dedicated, and you teach them somehow half-assedly even how to row, you have a shot, And so for me, that's always like, I want these younger coaches to develop a vision, With that comes fundraising, with that comes operation. The money will follow the success. You create enthusiasm, the money will follow. You don't need to win medals. You just create the vision, you create enthusiasm. So that's the cool thing about ACRA. Any given year, it can be mixed up. When I started out, the first years in Oklahoma City was terrible. Crosswinds, whatever, it's just bad. But for us, it was already a turnaround because I got the job because they were in the C final, Charlie final, the year before. Coach was let go. I was hired. We were in the A final. And then that was spring 1, 2010. 2011, we win. 2012, we win. And I was like, oh, no. Like that, of course, you're excited that they win and everything. But I was getting a little bit worried because I'm like, we can keep this rolling every single year. And if we keep winning this every year, then what's the point? 2013, we should have won as well. Actually, very fast boat. A couple hiccups there in that boat during the race and in the preparation, so that wasn't enough. And it honestly was almost. This is a lot of hindsight, okay? Just in case someone's watching this who was in this boat. It turned out almost like a relief because we need other people to mix it up, not just Michigan and Virginia. And then other programs started to kick in, and sure enough, now we go to ACRA now. You know what our goal is in the varsity 8? The number one goal strategically is make the A final. Not like what color medal we're going to go. No, it's make the A final, and then we'll worry about the next step. So this regatta has become what Greg Hartson from Michigan, because he's the leading force behind this, right? When the IRA kicked out the clubs in 2006, that was way before my time. I was watching this, with popcorn in hand, at Little Pete's in Philly, but I wasn't part of that. Those were guys like, especially Craig Hartson, and some of the bigger clubs at the time. They saved club rowing. They created the ACRA, and the ACRA now is the best regatta in the country, period. I mean, we all watched the IRA, but we watched the varsity 8 grand final, and that's it. But for the sport, and this men's rowing, not women's rowing. Women's rowing, they got it all figured out. NCAA seems to be working pretty well. But for us, for the clubs, there was nowhere else to go, and no one was helping, right? So Hearts of Michigan, a bunch of the other big clubs. So at the time, you had Ben Carey from Grand Valley, Purdue, Michigan. These were the ones that really drove that, plus a couple crews on the West Coast. And now it's just this amazing regatta that is obviously slower than the top level IRA, but not too far behind when you look at the B final. Definitely faster than, or as fast as the fastest D3, depending on the year. So in my view now, if you look at rowing, men's rowing, you got about 6 to 8 programs on the very top, and they're basically, within that group, some will have a chance to win, and some will have a chance to maybe make the B final in a good year. And then after that, everyone else is kind of like the same. In fact, I think some programs, some lower level D1 programs, are kind of a little bit homeless almost, because they don't have that excitement. So the ACRA now has so much more excitement in a way, because you go there and you're always trying to be a one final higher than last year. You try to evolve and people buy in, and it's fascinating to see. So I think, and then within the ACRA, obviously we have some tiers. So we have a number of super clubs, I call them, which is basically now, there used to be like 4 or 5. Now we have at least 12, I would say, where they're organized as club programs, but we run just like a varsity program. Minus scholarships, minus recruiting, everything else the same. Full-time staff, resources, boats, equipment, traveling. Like it's pretty good. So yeah. And then you have the other ones. You have sort of the smaller clubs from smaller schools. You have the ones that are sort of emerging, and you're just waiting for them to finally pop, that something comes out. And and a lot of these clubs have historically been established in the late 60s, early 70s, like late 60s and 70s. So now they're coming, in terms of their alumni population, they're coming into a maturity stage where the graduates from then now, they may have had careers, they may have had families, all that's kind of over. As we know, most rowers, almost all of them, are very successful at what they're going to do afterwards, however they measure success, but they just have the drive and the work ethic, which is really all you need to be successful for the most part. And they now have money, and that money flows back to their clubs because they realize, oh, wow, that was some of the most important things I've ever done. And, you look at UCLA, their goal is to have a $10 million endowment by 2030. They got already I think $4 or $5 million endowment right now. Michigan just bought their own facility, with raising about $1 million. So these things are not uncommon anymore. And that kind of, once you get into that level of support, a lot of good things can happen. So we still do rent to rowers, we still pay dues. That's like sort of part of the club culture, is like you have a dog in the race and skin in the game, but you're not just like scraping. Not every club is just scraping by anymore. Now, there is others that still do that, and they're really like running on low budgets and just stopping short of sleeping in their cars at the regatta. But they're all up and going because we, as the sort of the super clubs, the big clubs, the established clubs, we want to pull them up with us. My goal has always been exactly what we have now, which is the best college regatta overall. Looking at it, what's good for the sport. bringing in more people than anyone else that are new to the sport, and having an upward path where teams can do well. So you're a small program. Yeah, your goal is one day you want to be making the final, the B final in the 8, but right now you can race to 4 and do really well and build off of that. And that's what makes the regatta unique. It's like all the boat classes all the way down. And so especially if you're, to your point about the high school, let's say you're rowing in high school, but you're not going to be recruited. Because one of the realities too is that with the influx of foreign recruits on the top level, the recruiting landscape has changed. So case in point, when I came on the scene, let's say 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, if you were in high school and you were able to break 620, you could pretty much choose where you go, right? You can pick. Like you can go Harvard, Princeton, Yale, you can go Washington, Cal, and so on. You almost, like you were recruited, Right now, my understanding is, from what I'm hearing from people, is that if you're not under 6'10", like they won't even talk to you. Like a courtesy call maybe, but you're not going to be pursued in any way, shape, or form. And so that pushes a lot of, because also there is only so many U.S. high school rowers or junior rowers that are actually that good. So a lot of the other ones that were like breaking 620 or below 630, they kind of like are sort of falling off to the wayside. So it has changed that, and that has brought, at the same time, you had some growth of junior rowing and high school rowing. So that brought more experienced rowers into the ACRA schools, right? It's brought more people that may have been recruited 10 years ago, or may have been recruited, to your alma mater, San Joe, or Drexel or Temple, that these guys are not necessarily interested anymore. So where do they go, right? And so they're like, oh my God, I want to row in college, but I don't know much about these clubs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's where we come in. We're like, well, come here, we'll find you'll have a home, because I am 1000% convinced at this point that college itself, the education is, and we've seen this with the pandemic. The pandemic has brought this out to the foreground. It's totally overrated. I think if you just go and you're academically good and you do a bunch of internships and do that usual, track that everyone else does in a rat race, I think you're leaving a lot untapped that you could do. And I think rowing is one of those things that if you have the opportunity to go to school that has a rowing program, that rowing program is going to be one of the most important things you're going to do. If you think that you were some, hot shit in high school, like you made the varsity 8 at whatever X program, great, good for you. But you know what? Like, go to one of these club programs, and what happens there is that you also are required to take much more of a leadership role, even as a first year. Because if you're the guy that rowed in high school and you now are joining Virginia, I expect you not just to look after yourself, but to look out for your brothers on the team that haven't rowed before and help them get up to speed. Because guess what? In spring, these guys are going to pull your ass down the race course because they are maybe like physically more impressive than you, right? One of the things I tell, and we're about 2-3 weeks into it now, they're soon going to hear that, is if you rowed in high school and you're here at Virginia, then you weren't that good at rowing. Because if you're actually being really good, you would have been recruited, but you weren't. So you're going to start with a fresh mind. Like, I don't care really what you did in high school and what your ERC score was, because if it was good and impressive, you wouldn't be here. Right now, actually, I do have one guy who is really good. Like, he's came to summer camps and did all the different things. He actually might be in the varsity 8 for the head of the Charles. That's very rare, because usually we get all these other ones, that are like between 6:30 and 7 minutes to camp. Like, no one wants you in D1 rowing, right? So, but we take you, but do what we tell you, learn, pay attention, help the guys left and right, be an awesome teammate. Those are the people we're looking for. We got a home for those. And the other thing is too is like I think in college, rowing in college is so different because you don't have your day stuffed from 8 a.m. to 4 with school, and then you have to go to rowing practice, and then you come home and it's like stressful and you feel. I think a lot of kids are burned out. I think a lot of kids are burned out coming out of high school. Definitely burned out from rowing because the ones that row in high school, they may only have a one season sport, so it's like okay. The ones that row junior, I mean, they're done. They peaked in high school, like they're done. Like they just get into one of the top programs and then just hang on for dear lives. They don't go anywhere. And so I think there is so much potential because now you're coming to college and you have all this free time every day. You got like 3 hours of class and you got some homework. I mean, you have so much time to piss away that you could use in a meaningful way. And all of a sudden, you're spending more time on rowing than you did in juniors or high school. And you're closer with your mates. Like you're together all the time. You have lunch together, dinner together. You see each other in class. It's very different from the high school experience. And you are much more in charge of your path. Like, what is your journey forward? What's your path? What's the process that you are going to do? And you work much closer. It's just a different maturity level. I think especially for guys, physiologically, that's kind of when they really start to pop. We have guys that grow an inch or two in their freshman year in college. Like that's just physiologically something that's happening, and it all kind of collides right in that first and second year of college. There is social experience you're going to make. Obviously, go to college. Obviously, things are going to happen, but there you have them different because the other big part, and I think that's a key part, especially if you looking at a larger university, is that you enter a team and right off the bat, you're in a part of a family. So in our case, if I'm a first year and I make it to tryouts and I pass and I become part of the team here, I have 68 or 70 new best friends. I have juniors and seniors that are looking out for me, that are giving me advice on the academics, etc., that otherwise I wouldn't have. They have my back. They're going to help me socially to integrate myself into the school. And heck, if nothing else, I mean, they may actually teach me how to party, meaning how to behave at a party, because a lot of these kids coming out of COVID high school, like I saw with my son, they didn't do a lot of social stuff, right? And now you're right away, you're part of a big family. And I think that's why, even if you think you might not be good enough, you'll be surprised of what you can achieve when you actually put the work in, because you're going to have time to do it and you have guidance to do it. And if you, let's say you think you were pretty good in high school or juniors, and you're now going to a school that has a team that's maybe not ranked very high in ACRA or not even ranked, maybe outside the top 20, guess what? You have an opportunity, because it's up to you to run around and find 7 other guys that want to work as hard as you do, because every year you have a chance of winning the freshman A or the novice A at ACRA, and then build from there. You can take leadership, that can be entrepreneurial, that goes into recruiting people. And the sky's the limit, because you have all the freedom to do these things and actually grow up. And I think that experience is it's different from varsity, right? Where you get a lot of things just handed to you along with an expectation to perform. Versus in club, it's like, yeah, the expectations you make is the one you're making, but it's also up to you to get things done. So it's from a maturity level as a personal development, I think it is very, very different, and it should definitely be something that should be explored. So when I have the summer camps that we run over the summer for high school age kids, like we have the whole people that got recruited to Stanford, right? Got recruited to one of the top schools, but we also have guys that are just like, if they ever break 7 minutes, it'll be phenomenal. Like even in their college career. So what? There's going to be a team out there that will take you, that will help you, and you can make a difference there. And as long as you pursue that, and you like rowing or the dynamics of rowing to a level where or you would consider doing that, you should totally pursue it, because I think there is so much you don't know, and there's so much that you can influence in the process that will blow you away once you see it.
That's awesome. And I think that provides people with a really good summary in terms of like what goes into these programs. And one of the things I wanted to highlight, like you mentioned, like the ACRA, right? Like ACRA, like collegiate regatta, like the regatta itself and the competition level and how that has continued to evolve over the last couple of years. Like when I started rowing in college, my freshman year as a walk-on at St. Joe's, like I had trouble explaining, like what does it mean to be a Division I rower? Because we would be at the Dad Vale, which was, probably a lot more competitive at that time.
Oh yeah, it's big.
And I would be explaining like, okay, well, we're racing Michigan who might win, but their club program. Well, it's like, okay, well, what about the D1 programs? And like, it didn't really take me until it took me till like 3 years of my coaching career to really like grasp like the entire framework of like men's rowing at the college level. And the ACRA, regatta, like just organization and how that's almost filled or started to kind of separate itself from where there's that inter racing between the varsity and the club. Now you are a little bit more in your own category, which I think is an incredibly valuable piece because it gives you your own championship to run with and compete for, rather than where you are a program like where I went, St. Joe's, or any of those other programs that aren't in that top 12 of D1, where you're really just fighting for the C and the D. And it's a different trajectory to kind of crack into that A and B level final at the IRA. Like to have ACRAs and the evolution of that regatta, like I think it's an incredibly positive thing for rowing, because in many ways I think you want them to be almost separate to a degree, where it's like, hey, this is our championship. We are competing at a high level to win the A level final, or at least see the pecking order from A to E level final at the varsity 8. But then there's also these other categories like they have ownership of this regatta. But I wanted to circle around to like the super club teams that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So UVA being one of them, Michigan being one of them. I know Purdue, like these are programs that again, like have won, right? If we call the Dad Vale no shade against the Dad Vale, I'm here in Philadelphia, I can't say too much. But like these programs all used to win that regatta and be tied with varsity programs, right? Like competitive top 20 level Division I programs. Like talk to me a little bit, if you can, like about the evolution of the super teams and how and super clubs, right? I know that's probably a informal phrase, but just these programs that are essentially varsity level programs, but they just operate under the labeling of club program, right? Can you express that to the listeners out there, or
yeah, I mean,
go into further detail?
Look, I mean, the only reason that like a program like Michigan or UVA are club programs is because of Title IX, right? Because the only reason that these women's programs are D1 programs is because of Title IX, which, just to be clear, Title IX, I think, is one of those examples where I think the process to it is flawed, but the outcome was phenomenal. I harbor zero negative feelings about our sisters on the other side of the boat bay having everything, because it doesn't matter to us. Like, we are one team. Like, we are rowers, period. Everything else is an administrative separation that happens in the athletic department. We don't care. I think what Title IX has done for rowing in particularly, it was a turbo boost. With all these women programs starting and now more girls wanting to row. And I mean, look, when Mount St. Joe's, when did they start having a rowing program? That wasn't back in 1935. They started as a consequence. I think a lot of these junior women's rowing started as a consequence of Title IX. Girls wanted to row in college. That brought, of course, resistance at first, as always, but because our sport goes backwards, but it brought more people to the sport, more money, more attention. It exploded. And as a consequence, now we have these super clubs, because even here, like, people ask me, like, what would it take for you guys to be varsity? I'm like, look, it's conversation needless. We don't need to have this. It's pointless, because it would take, tens of millions of dollars to make it happen. It's not worth it. Let's just do what we do and do it right and enjoy it. And which is, men's rowing organizes the club. So you find this very often. You find it in Michigan. You find it at some of the West Coast clubs. You find it, all over the place where the women's team is varsity D1 and the men's team is a club program. In fact, in a lot of cases, it happened just like here at Virginia, where athletics just said, how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to take that rowing club and we're going to take all the females, elevate them to D1, and boom, we're compliant. And that's how Kevin ended up coaching the women and went with the women. He switched to the women before that. Like, he didn't do this because he was, going for the greener pastures, but he followed them into the varsity status, and the rest is history. So that's one of the reasons, because people are like, well, why aren't you, varsity? I'm like, well, the truth is, it's because of that, right? So you would have to create another women's sport first before you have men's rowing as a varsity sport. The way that the NCAA and athletic departments are going right now, I can assure you that's the last thing that's going to happen, is then creating another sport. So that's the reality. That's what we're not stuck with, but that's kind of like the boundary that we're dealing with, and that's just how it's going to be. But it didn't affect men's rowing negative in a way, because, as you said, competitive up to the deadline level. I will say it's gotten a little tougher now if we compare, because obviously a lot of the recruiting has been pushed out. So when all of a sudden Temple, Drexel, St. Joe's, and let alone LaSalle, LaSalle was, when you have a university president that strategically decides that rowing is an important part of our school now, which I commend her for. That's exactly the kind of person we need. But the first thing they do is they go for the low-hanging fruit. So they pick up a bunch of foreign recruits, push it in there, get some speed out of it, and eventually they're going to get a bit more creative than that. But you get a lot of these kind of recruits coming in. So where we used to be able to just, we beat Temple, Drexel, St. Joe's pretty handily back in 11, 12, 13. And then they started to figure it out, and some of the better recruits became available to them. And there is a divide that we can't break. The ACRA winning speed, not the time on the water, but what you need to win, hasn't changed in the last 15 years. It's very consistent, because we all have the same input, which is go find a bunch of studs on ground and teach them how to row. And you're always a couple short, right? So you need to have some fillers, like in every boat. And that's what the difference is. Like if I could recruit, if I had just 6 recruiting slots every year, it'd be a whole different game, right? But I don't. And neither does Michigan, and neither does Notre Dame or whoever else. So we're all playing with the same game. Hence, we're pretty consistent with what the waiting time is requires to be competitive. It's now getting, again, the pandemic slowed it down a little bit, but in general, we're always have about the same thing. Whereas the top end Dadvale schools have gotten much better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the Dadvale shot themselves in the foot, because they, just like a lot of the programs there, they also never really realized the changes that are happening. And now, being 1 week away from ACRA, all the ACRA teams that are even remotely competitive, they're not going to go to Dadvale. They're all going to go to ACRA, because you're not going to get beat by so-and-so and so-and-so that has, 3-4 recruits in the boat, and you're dealing with your walk-ons. I'm like, well, that's the better racing experience. Not because you finish higher. It's just like you're racing your own, It's like freshmen, novices are racing novices, kind of thing. So, and I think that's the strength of it, because it makes people hungry, right? So as I said, at ACRA, every year you have, at least in theory, you have the opportunity to win the Novice 8, because we all have to start over. Like I tell you, we go to the activities fair, which is like the first time that we really see who is in now, and we don't know how a team's going to look like. Like that's kind of stressful. That's stressful, man. You don't know what you're going to have. You may end up with, you may not even have 2 8s worth of people. These wild ass guys that back in 2011, 12, 13 that would just run in the door to be there. they're gone. Like, you have to go pull teeth to get people to come, and try it out. So it's tough. But when you have it, like, you have so much more of an opportunity to chart your destiny in a club program than you have in a varsity.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that your advice to novice, or not, just younger coaches out there who are um, leading the charge for an ACRA program, an ACRA program, like, where it's like, hey, like, every year you have a chance to win the novice 8. Like, I think that is incredible advice, because like you said, I want to dive into this now, but just with the makeup of your team, the majority of those athletes found it on campus as a program that, right, whether they saw a flyer or they bumped into you at the activities fair, one of the athletes or a roommate does it, and dragged them down. Like, that's how I found the sport. And I think, like, yeah, the walk-on stuff is always going to be powerful, in varsity and club, but it's literally the existence of a lot of these club programs are finding athletes who did it on camp, or who, just found the sport. And to me, and I don't know your thought, I'd be curious with your thoughts. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but like, those athletes, like, who find it while on campus, like, this is how it turned out for me, and here we are however many years later as a career, like, their level of excitement finding a completely fresh sport that is, tied hand in hand with training and working hard, like, the level of excitement is very, very powerful versus the athlete who maybe had, was doing it for 4 years in high school, 3 seasons a year, if not 4, and specialized into that, and then went the recruiting route. Like, talk to me a little bit, and maybe you can even, it's like, if you have, just, how you guys do it at Virginia for other coaches out there who maybe are trying to continue to expand their own rosters and find athletes and put themselves in positions to win the novice 8. Like, talk to me a little bit about the makeup of the team, and how that's being, finding those athletes and making sure that they understand the work that has to go in to be able to compete in the A-level final of ACRAs down the line when they are ready for that. Like, describe the makeup of the team and that trajectory for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that with very, very few exceptions, I would say in 15 years, there was maybe a handful times where someone that rode in high school, and rode well in high school, I should add, maybe 7 guys, I would say, that were actual rock stars, like from freshman year all the way to the senior year. Typically, the fastest, strongest guys in the varsity 8 are always guys that were walk-ons, that did other sports, right? That were good at football, basketball, baseball, you name it. But crossed over from other sports that were pretty decent, had a lot of swimmers. Typically what happened is that, and this is a bit of a US-based thing, you are not really good at running fast or catching or throwing the ball, you're not going to play sports in college, right? That happens to a lot of kids because you grow up and you try a little bit of t-ball and do a little bit of flag football, this. You try all the different things. And unless you're like a star somewhere, you're probably not going to stick. You're probably not even going to do it in high school, maybe. And then you basically think that, well, I'm just not athletic, right? Because you were never the first one to be picked in a pickup game of, you name the sport. You come to rowing, and all of a sudden you realize that you actually a VO2 max beast. That you actually like, wow, I can actually be good at this. You start out, and all the experienced high school rowers, the one thing they all have in common is that they all trash talk the art, right? They all hate it. Well, I tell them right away, all the walk-ons, erg's the greatest thing. I love the erg because I do more work. I listen to the coach. I can see right here I'm doing better. And even by the end of fall, on their first year, they start beating the high school rowers. By spring, they smoke. Like, because breaking 6:30 to someone who has never rowed before, and it means nothing big to them. For the majority of high school rowers, going 6:30 is still pretty quick. A lot of guys come in from like North Mid Junior. They had like one guy that ever broken 6:30 or 2. So they think 6:30 is fast and the ergs suck and 2Ks are terrible. And the walk-on has no idea. He just walks into something new. It's confusing as heck. You're going backwards. You're in a boat. Man, you swim well. Like the oars are confusing. But you get on that machine and I'm actually competing with guys that already been doing their varsity. They love that. And that is what they also realize, like, wow, I was never good at anything, but I'm actually pretty good at that. And, out of Virginia, look at Wyatt Allen, right? 2 Olympic gold medalists, Olympic bronze medal, head coach at Dartmouth. There was just a naive kid from Maine that used to play soccer, I believe, that just walked into this. And he was obviously not good at soccer, otherwise he'd have played somewhere, right? He was decent, probably a good athlete, but had no idea what his potential is. And that happens a lot. And we tell the story all the time. Because even today, that's still happening. Even with all the foreign recruits, etc., in the top level, when you find the beast, you go to beast. The question is just if they want to continue doing it, but that's another podcast there. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Is like right away. Another thing that we do specifically is that we integrate them as quickly as we can. Look, this is like selling crack, right? Because rowing, it's not fun. It's not something that's exciting. And you're like, oh, I can't wait to get on the water and, flop around in a shit boat and catch crabs. Like, that's not exciting. And no one wants to do that. It's the camaraderie. It's the people. It's the vision. It's what you see might happen that sort of draws you in. And so the first 2 weeks of our training was when we have the team selected, when we have the rookies, we call them selected, is they always work together in mixed sort of lineups and mixed compositions, and we do a lot of integrative work right away. Not just in training, also socially. This year, a little bit more with the women. We're going to continue to do that as well, so that they're recruited first years. They also like to have maybe a buddy that knows how to row on the men's side, and sort of create those synergies. And that is what hooks them, because they may not want to come back to practice, but they're going to get up in the morning because of their teammates, because they know their friends are there and they owe it to them. And this is literally the number one driver for most people, is the tribe, is their people, their family. It's not like making money. It's not like, oh, I want to be this or that. Like initially it may be, but then they realize what really matters to them. And the sooner we get there with those guys, the better. And I share that with any other coach, because that's so important. Like, you feel so lost on that day one, right? So then you come to the boathouse, and that's where your best friends are.
Yeah,
that's the key.
Yeah, I love that, and I think like that's the thing. It's like, that's why I love, I any opportunity I get, like, even though most of the people I talk to are people who row at the high school level, but it's also getting them to learn that mindset that makes a walk-on so special. Someone who's never done it before, like, where it's like they fall in love with not just what they do on the water, but the training aspect of it, the hard work. They're taking their skill sets that they learned from soccer, swimming, or lacrosse that they did in high school and had medium success, but not as successful enough to do it at the college level. And now they're translating that to a sport that is purely centered around work ethic. And, because you can learn how to row, but now they're literally, just translating that to, like, in this way that's just purely about, what you put in is what you're going to see on the other side in some capacity. I think that that's such like a powerful thing. And with that, I think one of the things that I'm also curious, like, you have these like, talk a little bit about, like, because I think one of the things that, if we describe, okay, well, varsity programs and club programs, but then you have these club programs that, like, I have a couple athletes that I've worked with in the past who wrote for some of the club programs, actually some of the quote unquote super club programs. And they're working just as hard as a lot of these varsity programs, if not to a degree more, because there's less restrictions, from compliance, NCAA compliance and all that stuff. Like, describe a little bit, if you can. I want to be conscious of your time here, obviously, but describe the what athletes can expect the work to look like, not just the racing, but the work to look like if they were to pursue as a high school athlete? Because I think that's a really important thing. It's like, hey, if, as high school rowing grows, I think it'd be great for more high school rowers to be aware of the options that exist and at the ACRA Championships. So
Yeah.
what can those athletes expect if they were to go to a school like Virginia and try to make a team for one of these, really powerful club programs?
I mean, I would say that if you want to go to one of those like upper end programs and you want to be fast enough to be in a varsity 8 that makes the A final, you're training just as much as anyone D1. And you said right, we don't have any hourly restrictions, so I'm not bound by a 20-hour week. Like, now, is it realistic that we can put in 30 hours of training or 40 hours like an Olympic athlete? No, it's not, because they still have to go to class. And I mean, there is logistics involved here, right? But the nice thing is that we don't have to pay any attention when we do these hours and how we do these hours. Like, as long as it works for the athletes and we can serve them is the best possible way, then that's what we're going to do. So the beauty is more that you don't have to think about it, right? We always train through finals. For example, like to the women, final exams and all the drama starts. Well, we can train here, but not here, and then this and that. And I'm like, it's so stupid because, and mind you, like, we're going from 6 to 8 in the morning, so we're outside of parameters of final exams. But it's like when you have a 9 o'clock or a 10 o'clock final and you row from 6 to 8, you're going to be at your best in that final exam, right? Like you got your daily routine, you got your endorphins kicking in, like you are ready to roll. And why would you then not go to training? It's like so important. So these are the things we don't have to pay attention to. It's great. You get a absolutely mandatory training program over winter break. You come back a week earlier to do just conditioning, which is erging twice a day plus mobility and resistance exercise. In general, we start out with the new guys, the rookies, the first years, the freshmen, the novices, whatever you want to call them. We start out with them pretty moderate. We give them like a full day off. So they get, like, for example, this year they're rowing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday they rowed, and Thursday they're off. Friday they row, Saturday they row, Sunday they're off. Like no afternoons, nothing. Oh, this is chill, don't worry about it. And a lot of it is also logistically, right? They're now here, they got all these distractions and all this paperwork they need to fill out. It's just like overwhelming. So we let them loose a little bit. Typically, as about now, they already start, guys already asking if they can still come in on Thursday, even though they're off. No, so it starts to kick in. And then by spring, they're almost doing as much as the varsity. On the varsity side, a lot of it just, depends on the ambition. Like, here's the training program. The training program is written for roughly usually 10 sessions a week, right? And so you got all the mandatory mornings, so that's 6 sessions. And then you got afternoon sessions that are prescribed, and those they do on their own, because depending on the different class schedules, etc., you will have a group that they may come and lift on Tuesday afternoon, and the other group ergs on Tuesday afternoon, or row small boats or whatever it is, because we have a great body of water, so we can row small boats as much as we want. There's no danger, or erging or lifting, etc. But they will come, like, long story short, if you want to make the final at ACRA, you're training 9-10 times a week. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. And that's the same for everybody. The volume, like, is a big piece, and you just have to be willing to put in the work. And especially to an hour team, okay, great, you have a good erg, you move the boat really well, but you're doing the bare minimum. Like, that's not necessarily going to give you any brownie points, because we don't really care about results. We care about performance. So are you performing to your best given the circumstance? And number 2, how is your result, let's say the erg, right? How is that reflect your potential? We want to get to your potential, man. Come on. Like, find these other, just because you are sort of gifted physically, it doesn't mean, like, okay, for you, the greatest of, like, so when you have a lightweight type, which we always have a few, the varsity, any lightweight type, well, we obviously don't weigh in for race day, but any lightweight type that breaks 620, that's pretty good, right? Any sort of medium-sized guy, like just under like 200 pounds, whatever, not super big, like go for 6'10", like aim for a goal. But if you like a tower of a dude with a big VO2 max and everything, it's like you go for 6 minutes. Like just because 6'10" would be fast enough, it's not that simple, but let's say just because 6'10" would be fast enough to get you in the varsity A doesn't mean that your teammates or your coaches are going to say like, that's good enough. Like, no, you have potential for more. So go after it, So that's how we hold them accountable. Let's sort of create a little bit of that. I wouldn't say too much like internal competition, but just like, this is what we do. Be the best you can be, push for your potential. But that's a process of maturity, because first years, it's not going to happen. Second year, sophomores, well, they're called sophomores at most schools for a reason. But it's like junior, senior year where it really kicks in. I will say the summer between your sophomore and junior year is where you make or break. That's when guys are like, okay, I've done 2 years of this. I want to be here. I know I can do it. They've seen their potential. They've seen the development. Now they kick in gear. And at that point, you're training 10 times a week and you're working out through the summer. Not every day necessarily, but you're doing something. And now it comes natural. Now it's because you want to do it. It's an intrinsic motivation. Of course, on the other side, if you're a varsity athlete, or let alone like a lot of the women that are, have pretty decent scholarship help from athletics, now it's a job. You're expected to do that. For us, it's like, I want to do it. I want to do it for my teammates. I want to do it for myself. I want to do it for my competition. We owe it to Michigan, Purdue, UCLA, Notre Dame. We owe these guys that we bring the fastest sake, because if we don't bring fast boats, then what's the point, right? And you have a lot more of that too on the ACRA level. I think and I haven't been to IRAs since I left Philly when I used to work the regatta, but I can tell you that the camaraderie and the respect between coaches and how we help each other out, and how the athletes, because someone that rows at Virginia on the men's rowing team has more in common with someone on the Michigan or UCLA rowing team than they have in common with most of their students at UVA. We're all in the same, everyone's putting in the grind, and it just creates an amazing, and everyone comes from nothing, athletically speaking, right? Because we weren't recruited, we walked on and made our own and charted our own path. And that is just there's a vibe there that's unique. Like, it's not lovey-dovey and, oh my God, no, it's blood in the water, right? It's blood in the water, but it's different. It's different. It's it's just a pure respect that everyone else you raced did just as much as you did or more. And so, the training volume is just as much as which I think has its benefits too, because it puts guys on the time crunch. And to do any college sport, but especially as a club sport where you don't have scheduling preferences or other privileges, and plus a lot of our guys, like our team GPA this year on the varsity is 3.7, with the majority of them in science, engineering, multiple majors. So they're all like bookheads. They're all academics, right? So they want to do well in academics. They want to do well on the team. You combine these two things, you really have to be disciplined in your time management and setting priorities. And I think that's one of the skills that are so important for ladies. And that leads me into one more point about the rowing. You have all the non-athletic crowd, and here in Virginia, we have we have quite a good amount of Greek life and basically the fraternities. That's for all those who have nothing else to do. Like all the ones that drink away their college time and just, try to get laid and do drugs and party because they think that for whatever reason, this is the only time in their life they're going to have fun, not realizing the actual fun starts once you're out of college, but that's another podcast. What it does for you to focus during that time and still have fun, but focus during that time, the benefits it gets you, because all these other people have to spend all summer doing stupid internships. You have rowing on your resume. I can guarantee you're going to get a job. Like, you go to a job interview, half-hour job interview, 5 minutes is introductions, 25 minutes is talking about rowing. Because every employer wants to know, how the hell did you every day you were at 6 o'clock at the boathouse what kind of person are you? You know, because they couldn't have done it themselves. So they're like admiring this. And especially now with Gen Z coming into the workforce, I mean, look, you get two things to be successful. You got to show up and do the work. You don't even have to be on time, and your work can be like 90%, sometimes mediocre. It's the same as rowing. You can be a couple minutes late to practice, but you got to show up and you got to put in the work. You don't have to put a PR every time you do something, but just do the work and success will come. So these people are highly sought after, not just by employers who have a rowing background. Those especially, obviously, they're going to look first for that in the pile, but also other employers. Like you look movies like Boys in the Boat, like some success at the Olympics. It brings rowing back into the forefront, and people are watching this and like, who the hell is doing this sport? And then they get a resume with someone with rowing on it. And mind you, no one cared if you're rowing high school. It's completely irrelevant, and no one cares about your high school results, by the way, so don't ever list them anywhere because no one cares. But if you row in college, and even if it's, I don't want to say any names because I don't want to get, piss anyone off, but even if you're in a program that doesn't even have an 8 at ACRA, that just has a 4, that's like in the B final or C final or D final, it doesn't matter. You put rowing in there. People will look at your resume different if it says rowing. And it's not a good enough reason to suffer through 4 years of rowing in college. But every once in a while, when you ask yourself, why am I getting up right now? Be like, well, you're going to be part of a very special club that you can only gain entry into by putting in the work. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how smart you are. Nope, none of these things matter. If you haven't done it for 4 years, you didn't do it. You know what I mean? That's a huge part. And the young guys don't see that. We don't talk to them too much about it because I don't think it's a good recruiting. You don't attract the right people if you tell them that, hey, if you do this, you're going to get, good for your career. It's a side effect of it. But once they get a little bit older, they start seeing that and they're like, wow, this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I absolutely love that just again, like I think the power of just the rowing off the wall or just what it provides you, like, and if you utilize that time properly and understand why you're doing it, like even deeper than just the strokes. But I think the biggest thing that and we'll kind of, I'll ask you one more question, I'll let you get on with the rest of your day here, but like I just want to make kind of like one last little thing on just the club rowing side. It's like as a viable, like the ACRA programs, like when you go to the ACRA website, I actually have it pulled up here, or the results page, right? And you look at the names of the schools that are supporting these or that have club rowing, like University of Virginia, you have, Notre Dame, you have Michigan, you have UCLA, you have all these different like schools that support men's club rowing. These are incredibly popular brand name schools that offer incredible experiences academically, socially, and you guys work just as hard as a lot of the varsity programs out there. And I just want to make that kind of clear to people, high school rowers who are listening, because it is a viable option for athletes to pursue, where it's like go to Virginia and go to a big time, school, great academics. They also have football that you can go to, right? A lot of these varsity programs don't necessarily have football programs, like Michigan, obviously, right? Like, I don't know, I just find it to be such a great avenue for a lot of people who are kind of finding that, looking for that, great school, great academics, and to work really, really hard, at something. So, no, I think that's a great thing. And so, Frank, my last question for you is just overall, like just general advice you would give, and you kind of already highlight a bunch of different things for people, but if you could kind of narrow it down to one last thing for people listening, the general advice you would give to athletes who aspire to row at the college level, whether it's varsity or club, that when they're here in high school, they can start to work on now. Like, what advice would you give those athletes who do want to be successful as college rowers, college athletes, student athletes? Let's finish things off with that question. But what advice would you have for anyone who wants to pursue this path?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a loaded question, though, because you got to ask, like, are you trying to get recruited? or are you just trying to walk on or rowing college? So in order to get recruited, obviously you have to work on your work, right? Because that's the single biggest. That's like I said earlier, no one cares about your results. I don't unless you like go to junior worlds and like win a medal, or maybe you'll win like youth mats, maybe. But it's your erg score, your weight, a couple of videos if you're rowing. That's the only thing that matters. I'm not saying that's good or I agree with it. It's just the way it is. And I don't have to recruit, so I don't have to worry about it. But no, I'd say like that's one part. It's like, okay, I have the caliber, I have the potential to get recruited into a school that I want to with benefits along with it. Then that's a little different approach, because you might actually have to peak out yourself a little bit in high school in order to make it. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. For those who, let's say, I tell everyone that's like reaching out, like, hey, I got into UVA, like kids that were in high school. I'm really excited. Oh, we are too. Wow. What's the workout program for this summer? I'm like, none. Stay active, do something. Okay. I want you to, don't just sit idle for 6 weeks at the beach. Do something. But we have no expectation when you come here, because we're going to teach you from scratch anyhow. In fact, the more mentally rested you are, the more open you are, the less worn out you are, the better. So one part of my answer is and what always has to encompass everything, have fun rowing, enjoy the process. Okay. So find that when you're in high school, find the things that you enjoy doing, make sure you're rested, make sure you get your sleep, make sure you feed yourself properly, recover well. Recovery is where you get strong. Recovery is where you get fast. So that's one part. It's really, and I think especially high school kids, they're all sleep deprived. Like high school age athletes need 8 hours sleep a night. They don't get it. Most of them don't. They get more sleep in college actually, because you can take naps, right? So make sure you're rested up, so you're not worn out. Make sure you take care of your body, do the stretching, be robust, do your core stuff, so that you don't get hurt in the first 2 weeks of college rowing, because you're going to come in and you try to go, especially if you're a recruited athlete, right? And of course, the other thing is, like, in terms of training, what can you do? I think that the majority of high school programs, or even most junior programs, are not sophisticated physiologically. The reason for that is not because necessarily coaches don't know what they're doing. Their coaches have to deal with a lot of restrictions logistically. So let's say you only have 5 practices a week. So, well, you got to teach you how to row and practice and prepare, and racing season is short and it starts early. We got to get you up the race pace. So you're going to end up doing a lot of threshold work, whether you know it or not. If you want to train productively for your erg score, for your future, you do steady state. Buy an erg. You should have an erg period, because rowing is not expensive as a high school athlete. Buy an erg. It's going to last longer until you're 30. Buy an erg. Do the steady state. 3 times a week, 1 hour, broken down into either 4x15 or 3x20 minutes with some rest in between. Find the right intensity, work with heart rate, work with target splits. I think a good rule of thumb is always your last 2K plus 20 seconds pretty safe. Just do that volume. It doesn't have to feel hard, but it's opportunities to take good strokes. It's opportunities to practice your catch timing, getting the hands up at the catch, tap down at the finish, your body over positioning, all those things. If you get in that additional 1 to 3 hours a week, and you do that long enough, you can simply add up how many weeks of training you're going to do, how many hours that is, and then you're going to find out how many weeks of training camp that equates to. And that's where the difference is, because I think it helps you with recovery, and you keep working on that base endurance, because the base endurance is ultimately where you're going to bring the speed. Because it's like putting money in the bank. It's not sexy, right? It's like fixed income. Like, oh, it's not very interesting. Well, you just pile up that money, pile up that base, and when you need it later on, it will be there for you. It doesn't go away very quickly. So I think that's a big one. I don't know if that. Hope that matches what you're telling people.
No, it without question does, and if we had another, hour, 90 minutes, like out, that's I love, like, just again, like, straight to the point of. I echo those same things to high school athletes all the time. It's like, hey, like 5 sessions a week where you're doing this, and this, racing every weekend. Like, okay, well, what are you doing on your own? Because that person who's successful, and trying to go to college for basketball or soccer, like they're doing more than just those practices on their own. They're also training on their own. And I think that's an important aspect. So I think the way you articulate it, I literally, couldn't say it any better. So, well, Frank, no, this was you will close things out here, but you alluded, or you mentioned a couple of times, that's a whole nother podcast. And after I rewatched this, I'm like, okay, we got to do a round 2 at a later date. Cause there's a lot of things in here that, we could, without question, dive into. I think would be a lot of fun. But just for the purposes of time, I'll let you get on with the rest of your week. But no, I really appreciate this. This was awesome. Are you guys going up to Boston? Are you guys going up to Boston this year for Charles?
Yeah, unfortunately, can't avoid it. It's kind of funny to head to Charles because you ask any college coach, like, if that thing would just disappear, we'd all be grateful. I shouldn't say grateful. We'd all be relieved. Because obviously, logistically, it's always a wrench.
Yeah.
But yes, we're going to Boston. I don't think I missed a single head of Charles since 2003, since my second fall in Philly. I wasn't, I came late, so they already had the boats. But it's just such a great opportunity for us old guys to connect and talk about, how fast we were back in the day, and to see other people. And, for the athletes, it's great. They all want to do it.
Yep.
So it's kind of like one of those things you just, oh God, I got to go to Charles again. And then you're there and you enjoy it. So, yep, be up there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I will be up there. Maybe I'll find you somewhere, and then we can connect in person up there. But again, thank you for coming on. This was awesome. And good luck as you guys prep for the fall. And we'll do a round 2 at some point. But again, thank you so much.
Awesome.
This was a blast.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for all the work you're doing with young athletes and giving them some guidance, because a lot of them need it. Because there's a lot of high school coaches, or almost all of them, are doing this as a hobby, and they're busy and they just can't do more for them. And I'm really glad there's a people out there to help them along the journey. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Frank. Well, good luck, and we'll talk soon.